Hello viewers, it's another beautiful day and today is the 23rd of November 2022 and the program is the Dailies on Echo Television International, your #1 morning show where we bring to you current and breaking news from our Nigerian newspaper. I am your host, Sela Elisha Dashom, and I have my co-host with me, Rachel Tansi. Rachel, good morning.
Good morning, Sela.
How are you doing?
I'm fine. How
Hope you
about
rested
you?
well.
I did.
I love your outfit this morning.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. We're live on Facebook and also on YouTube. Do well to drop your comment, your contribution on any of the stories that is of interest to you this morning. And I'll be starting with the first paper, which is the Nigerian News Direct. Media adopts new co-regulation code of ethics that you can find inside the paper. Dapman raises concern over federal government new tax regime. And on electricity, Edu targets $10 billion investment. The big story on the paper, mixed reaction over inflation control. The writer says as CBN again raises the MPR to 16.5%, plans to reduce the volume of 500 Naira and 1,000 Naira notes in circulation. Raises interest rate alone won't tame Nigeria's inflation, and this is coming from experts. The Central Bank of Nigeria yesterday on Tuesday raised the monetary policy rate by 100 basic points to 16.5% from 15.5%. The central bank, however, retained the bank cash reserve requirement at a minimum of 32.5% as well as the liquidity ratio at 30%. The CBN governor, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, while addressing journalists after the two-day meeting of the Monetary Policy Committee in Abuja, he said the move was a further response to curtail the rising inflation and boost growth. He also hinted that the much-awaited redesigned Naira note will be unveiled tomorrow by President Muhammadu Buhari at the presidential villa. And, you know, Rachel, the long-awaiting new face of our Naira note will be actually being, launched by the president. But then I'm worried because we keep increasing the interest rate. It was just 15.5%. Now we've increased it to 15.5%. Then you know that is at the CBN. And then when we take it down to our commercial banks, how would the interest rate look like? And we saw that as a result of this redesigning of the Naira notes, we saw that to even access a loan is even quite, very stressful for customers, and even banks had to open till Saturday so that people can get to deposit the old notes and then we'll be able to have the new face of the new Naira note. But I hope that in as much as the CBN are doing this to actually boost growth in the economy and another way to see how we can control the inflation. But I think it's not just the interest rate. I think I've said this once or twice here on the show that I believe that at this time, rather than the CBN concentrating so much on increasing our interest rate, why don't we look into the exchange rate presently in the country? Exactly. How much is the dollar to the Naira presently? So I think we should, put our focus also on that aspect and see how we're going to look. We're looking at inflation rate, we're looking at exchange rate, we're also looking at the interest rate. And these are key, key factors that we have to, look into while looking at a growing economy like ours, because we are still developing. Just the COP27 that rounded up on Friday last week, we saw how lots of developing nations, nations are looking how they can help developing nations. But we can't fold our arms and wait on them to actually, bail us out on one thing or the other. So I hope that with all this mixed reaction, looking at the inflation control and the interest rates and all of those things, I just hope that at the end of the day, the CBN have the interest of the common man at heart, because it's very important at a time like this.
In my opinion, the CBN is doing one too many things at the same time, and I don't see it as the right way to go about things. Can we just focus on one thing, okay? If we're starting with the Naira redesign to make Naira to circulate more in the banks, which they say will help inflation, corruption, and subsequently increase the value of the Naira against the dollar, then why don't we stick with that? I don't know why now interest rate is coming into the picture, and we can see an expert saying it won't tame inflation. And to be honest, I don't think it will tame inflation, because when you look at it, we have customers, we have business people going to the banks to get interest rate, and we know that, of course, this is the CBN's rate. What are the commercial banks giving as their own rate? We already know that it's quite different from what the CBN gives as interest rate. Now, automatically, if business owners are going into, they have to meet up not only with the loans, but with the interest rate. And when you look at it, to some way, I would agree with this expert, it's not really going to tame inflation. Not anytime soon. Perhaps in the future, but not anytime soon. Now, coupled with the fact that there's already Naira redesign, there's already inflation on ground already, and then now we know that we're going through food crisis and petroleum and scarcity, and the issue about subsidy taking away and all of that, and now interest rate, and we're not even seeing the result yet to some extent for the Naira redesign yet. We're not saying, okay, yes, the dollar dropped a little bit last week, but it's still not good enough. It's not good enough yet. It's still very high. It's still very high. So I feel the CBN is doing too many things at the same time. Can we just take it one step at a time? Let's wait. Let's see if truly this Naira redesign will achieve the first main thing you've designed it for, like the reason behind it. Then after that, we move on to the next. Okay, now you see there's a need. Okay, now we have successfully redesigned the Naira. It is helping with inflation. It is helping with the value of our currency. Then perhaps you introduce, okay, a little increase in the interest rate, and we will say, okay, now, yes, we're seeing one progress at one side, then perhaps expert will say, yes, now this will help with inflation and all of that. So I feel it's just too many things at the same time, and it will tame inflation to some extent when you look at it, because even the Naira redesign has not helped inflation yet, although it's yet to start circulating, but it might have helped with a little bit of corruption. It's still a little. It's still not everybody that's bringing out those money. There might be some few successes, but it's not big enough for us to say kudos, like it is achieving its purpose yet. So we'll just wait and see. But in my opinion, I feel that's too many things at the same time.
Well, I think we'll just keep our fingers crossed on that then to see finally when the notes are in circulation, even though the volume of the 500 and 1,000 will be reduced, but then we'll just keep watching and also, you know, tracking all the things that are happening in that space. Still on Nigerian News Direct, court orders INEC to resume voter registration until 90 days to election. Well, we hope to see if INEC will obey that order. Kogi no longer safe for criminals under Yahaya Bello, and I think we saw that since yesterday coming from the IGP. Don't give up on your dreams, Sanwo-Olu tells rescue street kids. And on Osun Tribunal, INEC fails to produce a daily case certificates. And we have two picture story here. We can see Governor Yahaya Bello of Kogi State with the IGP. And also we have another picture story, and that is from the Zenith Bank and other stakeholders. So if you are interested, just grab the Nigerian News Direct and read any of the stories that is of interest to you.
On this day newspaper, President to unveil new Naira banknotes today. Emefla, January 31st deadline for return of old 200, 500 and 1,000 denominations. CBN raises MPR to 16.5% to tame inflation. To draw from strategic gain reserve to moderate food prices, says no plans to exit ABP as disbursement hits 1.07 trillion naira. Don't give up on your dreams, Sanwo-Olu tells rescue street kids, and you can read that on page 12. At Senate meeting with Khan, Atiku Obi Adebayo discussed restructuring economy and security. And the big story on this day, Buhari kickstarts oil drilling in North as $3 billion Komani River oil wells takes off. And the writer says Northern governors, Tinubu and others upbeat. urge operators to learn from mistakes in Niger Delta. New discovery to add 1 billion barrel of gas to natural reserves, and facility expected to produce 120,000 barrel per day. House refinery and fertilizer plant. And there's a picture story supporting the big story on the This Day newspaper, and you can continue with that story on page 38. Still on the This Day newspaper, we have a picture story at the Zenith Tech Fair 2.0, and that's all the news on This Day newspaper.
On the Nation newspaper, we have new Naira notes go into circulation today. Interest rate now 16.5%. APC to launch crowd pooling app, raise funds, and then writer says party rejigged campaign plan. Document on 2.2 billion Naira SWF missing, ministry tells Senate. No excuses for loss to Saudi Arabia, says Messi. That's on the Sport World. You can read more of that on page 30. And we have on those seek investors for Sunshine Stars, Oyo Oke's promotion of 1,629 workers. Why Jonathan can't back Atiku by Wike. The writer says PDP candidate humiliated ex-president in 2015. The big story, which is on oil, Buhari warns against the Niger Delta mistakes in North. President inaugurates integrated oil business in Kongola Basic. And we have Tinubu says, I will recharge Lake Chad if elected. And I'd like us to, stay a little on this oil story, Rachel.
Yes.
I remember when we first had the oil boom, I think was it yesterday or Monday,
Yes.
where we said it was supposed to be a blessing to us.
It was.
But it later on turned out to be a curse. We saw that for the past 21 years or so, since we've been enjoying oil, I mean, Nigeria have made about 741 points, I think, something dollars from the oil and gas. Yet, after 21 years, what can we say about this? We know that oil accounts for about 90% of our revenue. That is where we generate most of our income and all of the things we use to, do well for ourselves here in the country. But then we saw what the oil have done. Are we going to talk about the oil spillage in the rivers? That most of those in the Niger Delta cannot go to their farms, they cannot fish. Some of them, it has affected their livelihood. And then let's not even talk about the issue of the militant that had to come up and then paying of amnesty. Until they were still having back and forth, how much percentage go to the oil producing states and all of that. And now we are having the nuts. Some state, I think Bauchi, Kogi, and one other state which I can't remember presently right
Gombe.
now. Gombe.
Yes.
Oil has been discovered there. Now, the president here is warning against the Niger Delta mistakes. Now, have we taken time to sit down and say what led to those mistakes in the Niger Delta? What did we neglect? What were the potholes that we overlooked and we didn't know that it was going to resolve today? Because whether we like it or not, if we have not sat down and actually rule out those mistakes that we make, we will repeat the same or even twice the same, because people are wiser, people are smarter. You cannot compare the technology back then to what it is right now. We saw where the CEO of the NNPC said that the technology oil thefts are using presently far away to what we have in the country. And I said this is a slap on our face. I'm not expecting this coming because we are supposed to be more advanced in technology than all of this oil theft. But that is just one thing, I think, let's just leave it by the way, which is really something we need to look into. So I'm looking forward to where we have a blueprint, what we have to do. Let's mark out guidelines, things we have to do to prevent all of these things from happening. How can we protect it? We're talking about the marine police and all of that, so we don't have spillage in the river. We know that we don't want to have issues where we'll no longer be having beans and groundnut coming from Gombe again because of oil. Or we don't want to be having where our fishes will be affected because Kogi and all of that. Benue and all of that. We know all of these things can be affected. So I hope that the government have actually have even 3 times of what we're having in the Niger Delta.
And I would like to say, so that even if we end up finding oil in every single state in Nigeria, as long as we don't have a structure, we'll still be a poor country. Like, it's already surprising and a hard one to chew, the fact that we are an oil producing country and yet developing.
In fact, we've dropped, Rachel,
We've dropped,
yesterday.
yes, we've dropped to seventh.
Seventh
Yes,
position.
to seventh position. That's already sad on another level. And also something you can't, as a Nigerian, you can't just wrap your head around it. Like, why are we a developing country and we're an oil producing country? And you just sit down and just get the statistics of other countries. But that's, by the way, that story for another day. But what I'm trying to say is that as long as we don't put up the right structures in place for this oil we are discovering, we're still going to be a poor country. Permit me to say that the government are the ones who gave birth to the militants in the Niger Delta. See, when you find out something, there's two sides to a coin. There's the advantages, there's the disadvantages. You need to bring in experts. You need to bring in people who will sit down and tell you the problems that can arise. Of course, there can't be oil without oil spillage. Like, it's impossible to. It's just one of those things that it's like a work hazard. It's like a mineral hazard. It's like one of those things. But then the government sit down at the time and put in a structure that say, okay, how are we going to make sure that if these people's water get polluted, something will be done that there will still be a clean source of water somewhere? If their farm gets damaged, what are we going to do to make sure that these people still have farm to be able to still have food and no scarcity? And did the government sit down and say, you know what, this is where the wealth of the country is coming from. These people have to be the first beneficiary. Of course, it might not be 50-50, but they should be one of the most wealthy states in the country. There shouldn't be anybody poor or lacking in the Niger Delta just for the fact that oil is coming from their place. Did the government sit down and put that structure? Automatically, without that structure, we have militants. Because they are sitting and saying that, you know what, this is our state, this is our place, and this is where Nigeria is feeding from. But yet we are poor, we are suffering, we are polluted, let me put it like that, and then we are suffering with damages left, right, center. We're not supposed to be suffering like that. So if the government doesn't sit down and bring out a structure that will make sure that people in Gombe and Kogi and Bauchi and all of these places don't suffer 20 years from now when oil is being drilled and there's spillage and there's one hazard or another, we will still be having the same problem. So all I want to say is that let the government sit down. Don't be excited. I feel it's not about rushing to go and start oil exploration. What are the things you've put on ground that by the time these places are in full, like functioning, and they are giving you, we can see there's a prediction of over 120,000 barrels.
Sure.
If by the time these places are giving you this much crude oil, what do you have in place for them? That tomorrow there won't be militants in Gombe, there won't be militants in Kogi. What are you going to do to make sure that, of course, technology has advanced now and improved? What are you going to do about oil spillage? We don't want to wake up tomorrow and hear we cannot have beans from Gombe. Like, it's going to tear us down, of course. So I think it's all about a structure. And a structure that will function with whether the present administration is in power or not. Don't put in a structure that goes with you. Implement laws and structures that stays whether your government goes or not. Don't do why are we thinking of scrambling amnesty? Why? Put in structure that a government cannot come and tamper with it. It stays there permanently because this oil is not going anywhere. So don't put in structures that are temporal, but structures that will last government to government and generation to generation. So I just hope that there is a structure that is being put in place, a system that will help Nigeria. If not, even if we find oil everywhere, even if I find oil in every house and at the back of wherever it is, we will still be struggling as long as we don't have a structure that will guide us. And what are the mistakes in the Niger Delta? Then let's fix it. And I hope that something will be done.
And I think we also have to do with insecurity, because looking at the fact that from Bauchi that is going toward the northeast, and we know what that means, insecurity and all of those. So make sure that the lives of those that will be draining, and also fixing refineries so that we don't have to keep, exporting before we import it back. So really, that's really something we have to look into. Well, that's all on the Nation newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, the big story: oil drilling begins in Gombe, Bauchi with 1 billion barrel oil and then 500 BSCF gas. And the writer says Buhari orders NNPCs to step up oil surge, says Kolmani project attracted $3 billion investment. Silva Kyari drum support for exploration across inland. Lawan advocates constitutional review for 13% derivation up from Buhari, says Tinubu. And at the top of the paper, Ronaldo leaves Man United after explosive interview. CBN moves to curb inflation as interest rate jumps to 16.5%. Nigerian media industry adopts new co-regulation code of ethics. And UX excludes Sudan, Mali, and others from Africa Leaders Summit, and that's because of coups. And you can read more of that in the Guardian newspaper. Atiku Okowa meets Khan, insists on restructuring, and we can see a picture or story concerning the exploration at Gombe and Bauchi, and one other picture story at the downside of the paper, and that's all the news on the Guardian newspaper.
On the Vanguard newspaper, we have a column coming from Efe Babalola. He said the Council of Legal Education in Nigeria should play the role of regulator that sets the standard for the provision of legal education in Nigeria. If you're interested, you can check page 22 for the continuation of that column. Media chiefs operators adopt new co-regulation code of ethics. We have not shifted ground on same-faith tickets still coming from Khan. Nnamdi Kanu sues Malemi, demand 20 billion naira. That you can find on page 11. And on inflation, we will continue to raise the MPR until, this is coming from the CBN, and I think that is until inflation is being stable, they will continue to increase that. So for those who are looking for the interest rate dropping, it's not the side Atiku and Wike. The writer following that says Atiku meeting with the ex-president fruitful. This is coming from the party campaign party source. Pro-Atiku group chairs Jang and G5 governors over stance on IU. That you can read. Corpse of 16-year-old girl found in hotel wardrobe in Bayelsa. And we have another story that says 20 million out of school children, another Boko Haram looms. This is coming from Obasanjo, and I look forward to what we can do with those 20 million. I think it's over 20 million out of schools children. Now we're even talking about from primary to secondary, mostly as a result of insecurity. Some of the schools have been burned, some of the community have been taken over by hoodlums and Boko Haram and all of that. So we look forward to what we can do. I remember during the past administration, that during the Jonathan, he made the Almajiri schools. I don't know if those schools are still functioning because we still have them littered all around the federation. So I hope that we look into what we can do, because the truth is that if we do not utilize this number, in as much as we are bragging that our number is supposed to be an advantage to us when it comes to human power, but then it will start at a disadvantage to us if we don't do something about this out of school children. It's very devastating. It's very sad. Sometimes we live in denial. We don't have to accept that this is the number, but I think it's high time we accept that this is the number we are having, and what can we do about all of this thing. So rather than mostly the governors of those states, rather than going from one tourism tour after another, visiting one thing after another, we should concentrate and figure what can we do in our own local area. This is where the state and the local government need to come together and see how they can make the schools environment very conducive, favorable, and so that schools will go back. So I really think we have to do something about that. Still on the Vanguard newspaper, we have NNPCL partners begin development of 1 billion barrel Kolmani oil field. And on insecurity, herdsmen invade Enugu community, kill 10, injure many, and burn houses. 54 die in Meduguri, Damaturu, Kwali, Abuja highway accident. This is still on the issue of transport and road. So we look forward to this road being fixed and more being done. And downside, we have Atiku Radi Chigoka replies Kwankwaso says no party has won Lagos, Kano, Rivers at once. That you can also find on page 9. And we still have the picture story on the Zenith Tech Fair 2.0 in Lagos. So if you are interested in any of the story, do grab the Vanguard newspaper and read any of the story of interest to you.
So before we move to the next paper, let me take us back a little bit. There's a story that said corpse of 16-year-old girl found in hotel wardrobe in Bayelsa. And this story broke my heart. And what I just want to say is that a 16-year-old is a minor. And I know we're in a society where everybody's minding their business, but we should be responsible for these young ones. Forget how big they look. I know sometimes we will look at them and be like, you're big, or we just pass them and we feel as an adult you shouldn't talk to them, it's not your business or anything. But we should be on the lookout for our minors, because this is still a child. Maybe because we're just in a society where we just feel when somebody just grows and they're tall and they're big, because sometimes even our younger ones, as we are far older than them, they're like taller than us, and we get carried away by their size, or maybe because their voice has changed, or because they look matured physically, and we stop looking out for them. Because I don't know why a 16-year-old girl's corpse should be found in a hotel in Bayelsa. Number one, let's say it's work. She's not supposed to be working in a hotel as a 16-year-old. That's not a conducive work environment for a minor in the first place. So you start to put your head around what took her there. Why would the hotel management allow a 16-year-old to be there? On what? Is she with an adult? If it is an adult, who is that adult? Is it a father? Is it her auntie? Is it a relation? Is it, why would such a young person be found in a hotel, first of all, and even dead? Who did she check into that hotel with? These kind of questions, like, if it means let the government have ID cards for everybody when you go to a hotel and you are below 18, you have to be with a ward. And who is this ward? What's the relationship with that person? There should be this kind of little investigation. We shouldn't just feel it's not our business, because this is heartbreaking. This is very sad. I don't know who is the family. I don't know who this person is, but we shouldn't be having this kind of happenings and misfortune in our society. It means we're not at the lookout for one another, and then it's breaking my heart, because this is a minor. She's not an adult. Who took her there? Who did she go with? On what basis? What happened? How did she end up there? How did she land herself there? Because we're in a community where you see young people partying. They are 16, for Christ's sake. They are not even supposed to have alcohol. They are not. If they must have a party, they should be supervised by an adult. It should be water and soft drink, Coca-Cola, Fanta. They shouldn't even be. But we are in a society where we neglect this just because they are big, we feel we can't talk to them. No, they are still children. They're still minor. They don't know what they want. They are still confused. It is our responsibility, as difficult as it might be, as we want to mind our business. Yes, it's okay. But when you see something that is not happening well as an adult, it is your responsibility to raise an alarm, to talk. Don't just keep quiet, because these are still young people. They don't know what they want. They are confused. They are battling with insecurity. They are battling with self-realization. So why would you think that they are matured enough for you to just let them do whatever they want to do? So I just hope a parent is watching, or anybody, the whole community, and saying, you know what, is my responsibility to make sure that young children don't end up in a situation like this, because it is a sad one.
You know, while you were talking, Richard, what came to my mind is the fact that we're in a society where parenting has been neglected. I'm seeing it from that angle, because if parents have really played their role as they are supposed to, not feeling that, okay, because the child is 15, the child is 14, we've heard cases, or we've seen cases where you leave a child and then he or she cater for herself, and you don't care what happens, where she goes, what her friends and all of that, you know. So I think that it all even boils down to parenting. What are you doing? I keep saying this. I said, as a parent, you have roughly 17 years to do your work.
Exactly.
After that, believe you me, little or nothing you can do about that.
Yeah.
And you cannot say you've neglected your duty for like 10 years and you want to start playing that role at 11 years old.
True.
It's not going to be possible, because already there's some questions that that child is asking, he or she needs answers at that age, because this is a time where you are struggling to know more about yourself. And then your peers will end up giving you the wrong answers at the end of the day. So who is to blame? In a situation like this, even though we know we have lots of cases of rape, of kidnapping, ritualists, left, right, and center, Yahoo plus, and all of that. So we really cannot, tell reasons why certain things happen. But I believe that when you have played your role as a parent, you will not be having these cases happening. Very little, just like you said. Right now, everybody says it's not my business. The mother cannot do it. Why should I? All of that thing. But I feel that this is a challenge to me. This is a challenge, I believe, to everybody. That when you see something not going right, just play your role as an adult that you are, and hoping and trusting that there will be a change. Because when we started from that level, no wonder people, I remember when they wanted to kick against sex education in schools, they said, and that is why we are having high level of rape and all of that thing. I believe it's not the way forward.
It's not the way forward.
Because it is important, in as much as it's not the responsibility of the school alone.
It's not.
It should start from the home. But then we look forward to when we do all we are expected to do. And then we'll have all of this, human angle stories reducing to some level on our
If your 16-year-old is not yet back home at a specific time, raise alarm. Don't slack for 1 minute. Raise an alarm. Because it means you didn't even know where that child is in the first place. It already means there's a crack somewhere. Your 16-year-old should still be your baby. Where did this child go to? Call, raise alarm. In fact, forget it. We know there's a policy of waiting 24 hours before you say declare anybody missing. No. The days are too evil. Go to the police station and then raise alarm there and just make disturbance. Let everybody be on the look, because no, we shouldn't sleep on things like that. A 16-year-old is still a child. Where is that child at this specific point of time, till the point that the child is dead and we are finding the corpse? No, it's really a sad one. And we hope the community and everybody, parents, family, friends, neighbors, do something about
Of course, Rachel, before you move to your next paper, I'd like us to take a break so we can let our viewers to chew all of the stories, the human angle, the politics, and every other story that have been flying on the paper, the interest rate coming from the CBN. Each and every one of us is affected one way or the other. So we'd like you to chew the stories, drop your comment on our Facebook page, and when we come back, we'll take the comment. Do not go anywhere, we'll be right back. Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, the program is The Dailies on Echo Television International. We've been looking at various stories from the CBN interest rate, which is now 16.5%, to the launching of the new Naira note by the president. And also we saw human angle stories where we have minors being found in drawers in hotels, which is very, very sad. So we really love you to, drop your comment, your contribution. What do you feel about all of the stories or any of the story that is of interest with you? And I still have with me Rachel Tanze, and she will be taking us on the next paper.
On the leadership newspaper, court rejects request to order continued voters registration. Buhari unveils redesigned Naira notes today. CBN raises interest rate. History as PMB commissions 1 billion barrels Kolmani crude oil drilling. And you can read more of that on page 7. Arms, hard drugs imported into Nigeria ahead of 2023 polls. Al-Mustafa warns, and you can read that warning on page 7. And the big story is on 2023 presidency. Christian leaders quiz Atiku, Obi, Adebayo over plans for Nigeria. The writer says we won't endorse any presidential candidate, says Khan. Give us a chance, we will make Nigeria work again. This is coming from PDP and Labour Party flag bearers. I will recharge Lake Chad if elected president. This is coming from Tinubu. Governor Sule presents 148.9 billion naira 2023 budget to Nasarawa Assembly. Still on Qatar 2022, Saudi Arabia declares public holiday to celebrate Argentina win, and you can read that on page 53. Saulu wants state input in electricity bill, and you can read that on page 45. And we have some picture story still with the president and exploration of oil at Gombe State. And if you want to read all of that, get the Leadership newspaper for yourself, and that's all the news on the Leadership.
On the Punch newspaper, Atiku Obi meet Khan tackles the APC on governance. It's late to resume voter registration, court rules. Fuel queues resurfaces in Lagos, marketers blame depots. I hope that this does not spread to other neighboring states, because we are getting to the end of the year and this is what we mostly see, especially when it's during festive season. So I hope that they sweep into action and do what is expected of them to do at a time like this. New Naira note for circulation before December 15. This is coming from the CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele. You can read that on page 29. The big story, 16.5% interest rate. Private sector predict factories shut down, higher bad loans. And the writer, CBN interest rate hike will increase manufacturers 5 trillion naira debts. And then we have monetary policy tighten with worsen inflation, says the NACCIMA. Punch demands 25.1 million naira judgment debt from CBN. That you can also follow up inside the paper. Impeach Ekiti Speaker heads for court, and we have Abuja Bauchi crashes kill 44. Federal Road Safety Corps plans mass burial. And we can see the picture story where Buhari inaugurates the $3 billion oil exploration project in the Northeast. And that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On the Blueprint newspaper, coal mining project has attracted over $3 billion investments. This is coming from Buhari. The writer says restate net zero carbon emission by 2060. Nigeria lost $2 billion to oil theft in 8 months. This is coming from the Senate. There won't be conflict between Bauchi, Gombe, and this is coming from Bala. You can continue with that story on page 8. And the big story, federal government Al-Mustafa won. Fake news, disinformation, arms proliferation threatening 2023. The writer says purveyors will see red, enough is enough. Police, NSCDC orders assure readiness for general elections. 2 million Benue IDPs may be disenfranchised, Otom tells INEC. Kano most peaceful in the north. This is coming from Ganduje, and you can read all of that on page 6. Khan sets agenda for Atiku, Obi, Adebayo, and others. Court orders INEC to resume voters' registration. Pastor, 2 others arrested for allegedly killing friend for ritual, and this is in Ogun State. And you can read that story on page 9 of the Blueprint newspaper. Physical examination of cargo laborers, says finance minister. And I'd like to say they should improve their technology and start scanning their cargo to see if there's anything that is contraband or is not correct. Then you can read that on page 23. Still on the Blueprint newspaper, 17 killed in Kwali Abaji Expressway. View caution on speed limit night trips. Suspected headers invade Enugu communities and kill scores, and you can read that on page 8. CBN raises MPR to reduce volume of 500 naira and 1,000 naira in circulation. Nigerian media adopts new co-regulation code of ethics. And Senate summons finance minister, CBN governor, and others over 500 billion naira development fund. That can be found on page 5. And that's all the news on Blueprint newspaper.
On the Nigerian Standard, we have Buhari inaugurate the Kulmani oil drain in the northeast. And the screaming story say Nigerian student lament delay in visa application. Some Nigerian students who apply for different research fellowship programs in South African universities have accused the South African High Commission of frustrating their programs by refusing to issue them a visa 8 months after application. And if only our educational standards and educational sector is doing well, I don't think you'll be going through this embarrassment and frustration. So I think this should be a challenge to the Nigerian government. Let us fix our own universities. That, yeah, in as much as we want to go out there for, wider knowledge, different, tend to see an environment, interact with other people, get new ideas. But I feel that most of these things come as a result of we not doing our own part here in the country, and then people treat us like trash in other countries. We saw that for the students that were in Ukraine. Before they got back to the country, they went through hell, So I feel that it wasn't just about our skin color, because if it was Ukraine, we'll have said, okay, it's our skin color. And then, even though we're saying there's no racism, but then we still see one or two there happening. But then what would you say about when countries like South Africa and Ghana do that to us? We are all blacks, So I hope that we'll look inwardly and see what we are lacking, and then we'll fix our own educational sector.
Like some years back, it was xenophobia in South Africa. And it was very bad, and I know some of the retaliation was us attacking and destroying some of the South African businesses here in Nigeria, like MTN and then ShopRite, which wasn't right at that time. But you look at it that you always be a second-class citizen wherever you go to, and when bad gets to worst, like in the case of Ukraine, you don't expect the Ukrainian government to favor you first. They have to look at their citizens first to safety and all of that. We're not praying for anything bad to happen elsewhere, but sometimes it's inevitable. Like it is the world, we know how it functions. True. Something will happen. You will not be treated first there. You will see small trouble first before something is being done and all of that. So it all boils down to us making our home comfortable for ourselves, that even if we have Nigerians out there, there'll be very few. Because not that we don't have South Africans elsewhere, not that we don't have Americans out there, but there are few. But Nigerians are like all over the world, and we are plenty. We're in large numbers. Like, we are not small, we're not few. We can have a whole state to ourselves in some of these countries that we are in.
Yeah, of course we do. Streets named after,
Exactly. So, of course, when something comes down to bad, they will always consider their citizens first, because those are their people. So let's just build a Nigeria where we won't have to face this embarrassment, as you said, but that home will be so sweet that others will want to come and not us going to them.
Of course, of course. Well, still on the Nigerian Standard, we have Governor Masari weeps as he presents the budget. So if you want to know why he did that, you can check that story on page 21. 600 health workers resigned from University College Hospital, and we saw one of the Ibadan yesterday, and still are resigning. So we have to also do something about our health workers and the health sector. Plateau for Atiku movement indicate Jang. And then we have court orders INEC to resume voter registration. Buhari unveiled the new Naira notes, and that will be happening now. And we are told that the CBN will not exceed the January 31st, 2023 deadline for the final introduction of the new Naira notes. So for those who are having the old Naira notes, do well to deposit your old Naira notes so you can have the new one when it's out. And that's all on the Nigerian Standard.
On Nigerian Tribune, Assembly crisis. Allow democratic process, Ekiti elders tell APC leaders. Buhari unveils new Naira notes today. Nigeria earned $741 billion from oil, gas in 22 years. This is coming from NEITI to release 2021 industry audit, and you can read that on page 7. Khan meets Obi and Atiku. The writer following that says APC deceived Nigerians with restructuring in 2015. Atiku says hints on constitution amendment. Support who you can trust, Obi tells Nigerians. We have not changed our stance on Muslim ticket. This is coming from Khan, and you can read all of that on page 4. And the big story on Nigerian Tribune, Buhari in Bauchi, Gombe border town, flags of oil exploration. And the writer says Lutz discovery of 1 billion barrel of oil reserves, 500 billion cubic feet of gas at exploratory site. Says Kongmani project challenging due to land locked location. Oil field to be developed by Sterling Global Oil, NNDC and NNPCL. I will recharge Lake Charge if elected president. This is coming from Tinubu. And at the downside of the paper, court declines to order INEC to resume voters registration exercise, and you can read that on page 5. And I like to say this is kind of coming late now. It will just be a setback if INEC will have to start registering voters. I know a lot of voters have like we saw 65,000 voters cards destroyed due to attack in INEC offices and other some of those kind of incidences in some states. But still, we have 90 plus days or so to election, and we know the process of voters card registration is not just the registration but also having the cards available before time. And I feel it will just be a little bit of setback for INEC if they will have to start dealing with voters registration again, and then election that is fast approaching. So for now, I feel it wouldn't be a right step to take, which is what INEC is saying, that they can't do that in as much as the court is trying to order them to do that. But then it will just be a setback, and I think it is a setback that shouldn't be accepted in any way. We should just be focused and just move on. For those who can't, sorry, but I think we have a lot of millions to be able to vote in the right candidate come 2023.
You know, Rachel, I think it wouldn't have been late if that responsibility was divided. You remember we said they don't even persecute voters, people who violate some of the electoral rules and regulation. And it's because INEC have to register, INEC have to print, INEC will have to conduct the election. I mean, that is too cumbersome for them. But if only we have another body that would do that. Because according to the INEC chairman, conducting election in Nigeria is like conducting election in like 2 other African countries. Our population alone, you could see. So just like you said, it might be late, but if only we had another body, it wouldn't have been late. It wouldn't be a problem. We have a body that actually registers, and then another body will concentrate on conducting the elections. But like you said, it was just cumbersome, and that's why they would definitely have to complain.
Yeah, we have few more stories on Nigerian Tribune. 2 policemen, 59 others die in Borno, Plateau, Abuja, Kogi auto crashes, and you can read that on page 26. Media adopts new co-regulation code of ethics, that can be found on page 2, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Daily Times newspaper, the MPC CBN tightens interest rate to 16.5% amid increasing inflationary concern. Retain the CRR 32.5%, and then the LR at 30%. So you can do well, grab the paper and read more of that story. Tackling insurgents, Buhari biggest achievement. This is coming from Arebe Sola. And he says investigation concluded into Kuje prison break. Explain why reports can't be made public in as much as we want to know more. But let me read a little what he has to say about that. The Minister of Interior, Arebe Sola, on Tuesday said the biggest achievement of Muhammad Buhari administration is the tackling of insurgents. The minister stated this in Abuja at the 4th edition of the President Muhammad Buhari administration scorecard 2015 to 2023 series organized by the Ministry of Information and Culture. So you want to know more about that, do well, grab the paper. It's on the front page and also more on page 2. Buhari to unveil redesign Naira notes today, says Godwin Emefiele. Court declines to order INEC to resume continuous voters registration. And on oil theft, Senate committee fails to name the thieves, and we are still waiting for the names of the thieves and also those who are sponsoring Boko Haram. We will not get carried away because things are looking a little bit better. We still need the names of those who are sponsoring all of these things. And we have my administration attracted over $3 billion investment to oil and gas sector coming from President Muhammadu Buhari. Restate the net zero carbon emission by 2060. Downside of the paper, Nigeria earned $741.48 billion from oil and gas between 1999 and 2020. This is coming from the NEITI. You can read more of that on page 4, and that's all on the Daily Times.
On the Daily Independent, the big story, we've attracted $3 billion investment to oil and gas sector. This is coming from Buhari. The writer says flags of first crude oil drilling project in Bauchi and Gombe. NSCDC operatives intercept 9 trucks loaded with stolen crude oil. You can read more of that on page 4. And I'd like to say kudos to the NSCDC for also doing their job and helping us fight crude oil theft. Buhari to unveil new narrow route today, which is on most of our paper, and we are looking forward to the unveiling. Senate bows to pressure, fails to name masterminds of oil theft, and you can read that on page 7. Says Nigeria lost $2 billion in 8 months, and this is too much of a loss for us not to know who are those involved in the theft. So I hope we get to know who, because they need to be persecuted, put in jail, put in prison, whatever is the sanction, but we need to just do away with such people. Still on Daily Independent, Sierra Leone takes delivery of first batch of innocent vehicle. That can be found on page 7. And I like to say, let other people not benefit from what we have. Nigerians should also purchase innocent vehicles. Dangote Sugar upscale its $700 million investment, increases plantation to 24,200 hectares, and you can read that on page 7. Media adopts new co-regulation code of ethics. Imo PDP crisis takes messier dimension, and that can be found on page 6. And we have court declines plea to resume INEC voters registration exercise. And at the downside of the paper, Wike presents 550.5 billion naira 2023 budget to Assembly. That can be found on page 6. And that's all the news on Daily Independent.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for doing this with me.
You're welcome.
Yeah, this is how far we can go on the program, The Dailies on Equal Television International. Thank you to everyone who made this program a success, the crew members from camera down to social media, MCR, and everybody that did their work. Thank you so much for always being there to make sure the program comes promptly. Until we come your way again, do have a blessed day ahead.